Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind.
Welcome back, or welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. I am Jared Cohen with my partner in crime,
Alexander Ellis.
And today we go behind the podium with a coach, physical therapist, best-selling author, thought leader, surfer, paddler, Olympic lifter, power lifter, CrossFitter, dancer, science fiction lover, podcaster, father, husband, business owner, and ambassador of suppleness. Specifically, this guest of ours has revolutionized, democratized, and mobilized, pun intended, the public's understanding and ability to perform basic maintenance on themselves so they can improve their performance and eliminate pain. This guest coach of ours wants you to be as user proficient with your body's machinery as you are with your smartphone. Without further ado, it is mine and Alex's pleasure to welcome best-selling author of Becoming a Supple Leopard, Ready to Run, and Deskbound, Mr. Kelly Starrett, to Behind the Podium.
That was the best intro of all time ever.
Yes!
That's so good. Ambassador of suppleness is what I'm going to have my kids refer to me as from now on. Excuse me, Mr. Ambassador. Yes, child. Amazing.
That's how they'll refer to you in parent-teacher conferences as well.
That's right.
That'll be good. Well, yes, thank you so much. We know you are busy on a mission every day, and it's an honor to have you here and get to pick your brain and hopefully do a little bit of reflecting on the journey. It's been a while since this mission has been in effect.
True fact. Well, if Miss Ellis didn't have all those incriminating photos of me, this wouldn't have happened. But it's nice. What's fun about these things is there's no substitution for being in a field for a decade plus 2 decades. You just start to know people and start to be able to, it's really fun to go to work with your friends. It's great to see you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, all right. So a little throwback here. August 22nd, 2010 was your YouTube premiere. You titled it The First of Many Beatdowns. And I've heard you say in other interviews that you started Mobility WOD unsure where it was going. 6.5 years later, the landscape of strength conditioning, fitness, and health and wellness has changed a lot, and so have you. As previously mentioned, you have 3 books under your belt. So currently, I'm interested in a classic question. If you could go back to your first of many beatdown self and whisper any words of wisdom or caution, what might you say?
Hold on to your butt. And also be patient. I think one of the issues is that sometimes psychologically we're further ahead than technology, than the world can go, and be patient with the process. In the intro to one of the books a long time ago, I think I intimated that one of the beautiful things about putting your information out there in a book is that you are now exposing yourself to everyone's, overt feedback. There's a feedback loop now, and one of the things that we didn't realize is that when we started this, I had already been coaching a course that had been going on for many years already, and I had a gym that I was running, and had a physio practice, and I think one of the things that you set out to do is to solve a problem, And in having people continue to focus on problem solving instead of internet fame. I mean, if people got paid $1 per Instagram follower, the world would be a different place. But you have to set out to with intention to solve a problem or be a good coach, and everything else is peripheral around that. So being patient, you don't have to go out and, there are these masters out there who have been holding the doors open for us forever. Yeah. And, this is a good case study in this, is that Gray Cook, who is one of the co-founders of the Functional Movement Systems SFMA course, is a brilliant physio, brilliant coach. He's been doing this a long time. And we actually have become quite good friends, even though we're sort of occupy the same space. We see ourselves as, both roads leading to Rome, right? And we have a little bit different takes, but our systems completely overlap, and we completely see the world the same way. And one of the things that would be easy for me as a new coach or new voice in this performance space 8 years ago in 2010 was to say, sort of bag their system. Like, here's their problems, here's why mine's better. And that's really not to do the credit that all the heavy lifting that they've done before. And it's easy initially when you're a startup to sort of point and swing sticks at the bigger target. Right. And everyone who's already there is not going to spend time punching down. So what I would say is, as we give homage and continue to work and reference the people who are our influences, there's no diminishment in that. You're not less of a coach because you can say, this is where I came from. This thinking popularized by this person has been radical in my understanding and application. And when we start doing that, you're going to find that you actually have a lot more street cred than trying to pretend like, look what I invented. Yeah. I mean, just a couple days ago, Matt Vincent and Mark Bell, a couple strength athletes, power athletes, texted me a picture of something. They're like, this motherfucker is ripping you off. And I was like, well, he's copying a video we did in 2011. Yeah. And if that's where he is right now, like, bless his little heart, because we actually have bigger problems that we're trying to solve. And if you're going back and trying to repurpose and not give homage to that, well, shame on you. But in the long term, people will understand. And, there's that old saying, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, take someone with you. Go together. And I think the real strength of our community is the work that we're doing together, the collaboration, the collaborative efforts of the coaches in my inner circle are tremendous. People are transparent, and we also have this tacit understanding that we will not rip each other off. Instead, I'm like, look what my good friend has done. Yeah. This is what my understanding is. And showing your work and giving credit to the people who've done the lifting is a vital piece. But in this fitness space, which is a relatively new business space, it's sort of the Wild West right now, where people are just, going to rip off, take your little piece of the pie and call it good.
Yeah, I'm glad you alluded to that a little bit, because it's obviously, I a fan of yours. Something I've been aware of as this space has changed a little bit in the Wild West, as you referred to it. You see a lot of different handles now. Supple this or smash that.
Shoulderflexibilitysolutions.com.
Right.
What is that?
Yeah.
Seriously? So just recently there was a big, something popped up on our Facebook feed, and it was our banded distraction work, which we popularized around the joint. I mean, that's us. I mean, Dick Hertzler was distracting joints long-wise, but no one was applying the bands to the Australian, this model of the arthrokinematics, right? And these guys were like, look what we're doing. And they had the band going the wrong way in the diagram. And I was like, well, there you go, ass. Yeah, I mean, not only are you ripping us off, but you're also, doing it wrong. So, it's okay to say where you're coming from, and it's okay to show your work. And that's how it's done everywhere else, by the way, not just here.
Yeah.
I think too, there's this weird sense of competition. And I don't know if maybe it's evolution of social media, and everybody's showing off, look what I'm doing. But as you're saying, if you want to go far, take someone with you, that's so much more impactful and powerful than just putting everybody else down and trying to push yourself to the top.
And it's hard because it's easy. I think without being too political right now, let me just quote our current speaker, Paul Ryan. He's like, wow, it was really easy to be the opposition party for a long time as Republicans, and it's actually more difficult to be the leadership party. And I think it's easy. It's always easy to be an upstart. It's easy to be disruptive. It's easy to be like poking holes and things and starting fights on the internet because it doesn't cost you anything. And what you need to do is continue to serve the people that you serve and do it to the best of your ability, and continue to see problems and be of service to the coaches and athletes who are trying to solve these problems. And that's an important sort of iterative part of coaching and teaching. We had this conversation a lot in the physio community. And people were like, how do you get involved? How do you build a following? Or, I was like, wrong intention.
Yeah, right. Wrong starting place.
How are you, right? And I forget which coach it was, an old track coach who said, look, if you want to chase the goddess of wealth and you chase her, she'll flitter off and leave you high and dry. If you chase the goddess of wisdom, then the goddess of wealth will become jealous and will come along with you anyway. And that's really allegory for doing the right thing, working to support the people in your field. And it doesn't mean you have to, give away what you're doing. We feel strongly that everyone should be able to make a living off their intellectual property. But it's okay to also say, hey, look, we're going to play this long game, and I'm just going to serve my community even better. And that's what we do. Continue to solve the problems. This fitness space, I think, sometimes for us, it's easy to get lost in the fact that it's sort of a new concept, new field. But these things have already happened and played out in other fields. And for example, the second you stop innovating and you start codifying and guarding your secret, you're dead and irrelevant. You have to continue to evolve. You have to continue to refine. We're spending a lot of time right now I'm deep into a complexity theory and working to drive. Right now, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about driving consilience into the practices. How do we streamline the athletic process? How do we streamline and be more efficient in our coaching? Because right now, we interviewed Katie Bowman once, who is brilliant and I love, and I'm such a fan.
Yes.
And someone sent us an email and was like, well, when the hell do you do all the Katie Bowman stuff if I'm deadlifting and counting my macros? And I'm like, you're right, sir. And instead, what Katie's not saying is, abandon your practice and come in, but we have to streamline and figure out how we can make people's lives easier and be of better service to that community. And when you continue to do that, I guarantee you can make a nice living that way.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, I love the you put out this 24-hour adaptability,
Yes.
24-hour adaptation cycle infographic, which is beautiful and a great example of taking these somewhat nuanced, complex topics and just being able to say, hey, here's your checklist, much like you've done for movement organizationally, and giving people a context to make it accessible.
Well, I appreciate that. We started that conversation because I was working with, sometimes we don't put it out there, but we get to work with a lot of very special groups. I'm in a lot of universities. I'm in a lot of high schools. I'm in a lot of professional teams. I'll probably work with between 30 and 40 professional teams this year, and a lot of tier 1 military assets. We see a lot of dirty laundry, and what we see is actually really smart people who know how to get people fit and strong. And what we have learned over the last decade of teaching this is not to come charging in saying, your system's broken. Like, let me show you the better system. But understanding that very sophisticated people have been teaching and successful for a long time. And instead we say, how can I help you? How can I help streamline and conceptualize this? Because I'm from the outside, I can see things more efficiently. And that was really where the 24-hour duty cycle was born. Because what we saw is in this modern health hacking kind of atmosphere, people get very confused. Yoga Tuesday, Thursday. I do, I take this turmeric. I do these air squats. I go on this fast. I only eat MCT oil for breakfast. And then people suddenly, I'm like, how does that all fit together? What's the common thread through that?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to do. And that was the first time we started presenting this 24-hour cycle in a concept that people could all relate to. Oh, where can I block behaviors? Where can I make the most change? And we put that up on the internet and people were like, what? Eat breakfast? And some guy was literally like, stay skeptical, people. And I was like, really?
What?
about like you've just gone through a long fast and I'm asking you to eat some protein and some nutrient-dense foods.
How dare you?
And you're like, there's no science. And I was like, bro, you obviously have never worked with actual people before or in professional athletics before, because we've got to fuel because we've got multiple sessions a day. And what we find is these are best practices. Apply them as you want, right? But what we find is that people are making big type 1 errors, big fundamental processing errors into their daily lives. They take their cell phone into the bedroom. They're, they don't sleep. And what we start to see is we're spending a lot of time solving these problems with hacks and shortcuts instead of actually getting to the root of the problem, which is no different than doing 10 skill transfer exercises in my Olympic lifting instead of fixing my missing internal shoulder rotation, right? That's what we want people to do. Right. You got to get back to first principles. We have to simplify, and understanding that these are complex systems. The body's a complex system. Our environment's a complex system with lots of internal feedback mechanisms. So if I am a little bit sleepy, I probably want to eat some more carbs, and I have a coffee at 4 o'clock to get through the day, and then pretty soon I can't sleep, so I have a glass of wine to come down, or an Ambien, or I get high, or whatever it is that people are self-medicating, and then my sleep quality isn't as very good. And you start to see that in the morning, my desire to train is off, and I don't want to move more. And right, we start to see these really weird, complex feedback. So at some point, we break these complex feedback loops by saying, here are best practices on there. And if you're coming at me saying that you don't need to sleep at least 7.5 hours a day, you're an ass.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Preach it. Seriously, though. I mean, yes, everything stems from good sleep, exactly as you're saying. Which actually, I do have a question kind of about sleep and time. I mean, because the Mobility WOD and WOD videos, you did every day for multiple years, which, I mean, I'm blown away. Like, where did you sleep? Where did you do stuff?
Simple. I have a wife who's a genius.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she is. She's pretty amazing. Getting up every day and making these videos and doing this stuff, because you set out with intention, did you find that it wasn't necessarily a chore?
Oh, no. Early on in the first one, I would be working long hours. I'd get home, like sometimes I'd finish my last class at 8, and I'd close up the gym and be home by 9. And I'd sit down on the couch and actually pass out. And Juliet would wake me up and be like, we got to film a video. I'd be like, oh, I got it. And so some of those videos where I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, take the baby. Yeah. And I'd be like, hey, welcome back.
Yeah.
And, and I think, one of the things that it's important for coaches, and definitely important for physical therapists to remember, is that you need to be a user yourself. You can't lecture someone about sleeping more who has a baby and 2 jobs and a commute, and then that's just like, you're just not part of the solution in that situation. And one of the things that has been very useful for me is that we see the sort of loads and demands psychosocially on, physically on athletes. What we need to do is say, how can we simplify this program? And certainly it helps when I develop a practice. And so now, we, a few months ago, like 5 months ago, switched, instead of programming every day, we now do a follow-along video every day on the website. So it's 10 or 15 minutes. And what we do now is we have blocked times where I have to show up and do this. There's nothing else can get booked on top of that. So developing practice is the same thing as demonstrating practice. It's the same thing as instructing about, here's what we do. And what we've crafted out of that is this mantra of not being heroic, but being consistent. And that really is how we make long-term games. And it's awesome. Not sexy. It's not sexy to be consistent. It's sexy to be like, I did a double Spartan race, and then I went to Olympic lifting club, and then, I cleaned up my macros. And then on day 2, you had a cheat meal and 2 days off. That's not what we're,
Yeah,
so true.
So going back to what you were talking about with the 24-hour adaptation cycle, and at the heart of that, it being principle-based, I'm curious, for you, has your approach to distilling principles changed within, let's say, even the past 7-10 years? Has there been a shift in your thinking about how to emphasize principles versus methods?
Well, that principle versus method is a really good point of conversation, because there's lots of methods and few principles. But, we have to make sure that we keep in mind that the scientific process is not about random controlled, placebo-controlled trials. That's not it. It's about induction. I mean, go back to Sir Francis Bacon 101, which is, can I see large data sets and draw inference from those large data sets and disparate data sets, so that I start to see best practice come around? And that really starts to frame our understanding. And I'll tell you, when we started this project on Mobility WOD, YouTube was barely a thing.
Yeah.
And the iPhone camera didn't have a video camera. That's how long ago it was. I actually filmed on another camera. It downloaded, and you know how long it would take 45 minutes to download an 8-minute video.
Oh yeah.
And then and that was to the it took forever. And so the issue here is, when we're teaching, what we know is about expert clinicianship is largely about pattern recognition. And one of the benefits of being in a working gym for now 12 years, we've been coaching in our own process for almost 13 years now. And what we've seen is a lot of people air squatting, a lot of people deadlifting, and a lot of people going overhead. And what when I started teaching, the archetypes didn't exist, the fundamental positions didn't exist. I didn't understand because I couldn't see enough. And I was always struggling to say, where's the way through? Where's the commonality in this? Why is the bench press, why should it look the same shoulder position as the finished position for my row or the finished position for my push-up? It's chaturanga, bench. Like you should be able to see those things. And if I straighten the elbow out, then that's the end position of my running stride, right? And why can't I see that? And if my elbow doesn't come out of the water in the same way at the bottom position of my bench when I'm swimming or doing chaturanga, then I start to make swimming errors. And what we're trying to do is, again, drive consilience and unification of knowledge across these pieces. So as we saw more and more data, we were able to see the principles underneath that and reconcile that with our understanding. Because people forget, I'm also a physical therapist and had formal doctoral training in physio and lots of anatomy and lots of physiology. And I had to reconcile. And if a model, because what we've really tried to do is create a model for human movement, right? This is how humans move. And a good model has to be explanatory. It has to explain the phenomena that you're seeing. It also has to be able to predict. In our model, not only explains what should be happening, but it predicts where you should be finishing, and it predicts where the errors are going to be, right? The opposite of the archetype, the broken archetype, as we call it, is, if I'm missing end range flexion, external rotation, which is the position of the overhead, end range flexion of the shoulder when I'm holding something overhead, then it predicts that I'm going to probably see an elbow flare and end up with this incomplete position. But it also has to be reproducible. And the nice thing about being in a working gym is that we've probably done about 140,000 athlete hours since we've been open, which is a lot of people going up and down and putting things over their head. And also a lot of us saying, lay down, let me see if I understand what I'm seeing. And it was nice to be a physio and a working coach and then go work out with dozens and dozens of, I had 32 Olympians last year. Right. Because I get to see such large data sets, sometimes it looks like I'm looking through the wall, but instead I've actually stood around the corner of the wall. I've stood in all those vantages so I can sort of see a little bit more. And what we need to be doing as coaches is to go from cause to effect and effect back to cause. And that's a crucial component to why we teach. Otherwise, if we can't do that, let's pretend that technique doesn't matter anymore. Just round your back and lift it up. Doesn't matter, right? Otherwise, it does matter. Let's make sure that we can systematize that and also explain phenomenon across populations, across age division, across injuries. That model has to account for all of that, that I should be able to teach children how to jump and land and have that be in a direct line to my high-level Olympians and how they move. And if there's a break in that, if there's dissonance in that, then the model is incomplete or someone has a problem in their thinking.
And while you are engaged in this process of pattern recognition and noticing from the various vantage points, what happens to you when you yourself experience your own cognitive dissonance? How do you reconcile that, or is it merely just a matter of kind of patience and kind of waiting to see how things play out?
Yeah, we were interviewing Harry Mara. He's the most probably successful track coach in the history of the world. He has coached more decathletes to Olympic gold medals and heptathletes than anyone else ever. I mean, he's the man. And he said one day he was out coaching his current Olympic champions and medalists, and they were like, "Hey, coach, this long jump is a lot like the shot put." And he was like, "Yes, it is." He finally saw that they were seeing the connection. So what's important is the application of this, because a lot of people are still struggling to run the room. They turn the music up too high, they stop coaching, they start cheerleading, right? There's very little process given to new coaches about how to teach, about the discipline of motor learning, the discipline of communication. And I'll stop right here and just do a plug for a brand new book that's come out by our good friend Brett Bartholomew.
I just got
Conscious
it.
Coaching.
Yeah.
I cannot recommend this enough.
Amazing.
It's a vital first step. And what Brett is going to do is revolutionize and continue to drag into the future the communication, self-reflection, meta-awareness of coaches. We have to have that meta memory, meta-awareness, right? Meta-process, that awareness of self. And so, one of the things that is useful, for example, instead of saying, how do I resolve the dissonance? What I would say is that when I listen to coaches teach, I listen less to what they're saying and pay attention more to the problems that they're trying to solve. That way I can understand that maybe, hey, I see someone trying to solve a problem, but what is it they're trying to solve? So, subsequently what ends up happening is that we don't get bogged down in methods, we get bogged down in ultimate solutions. And so someone may be teaching something that is highly ineffective and highly inefficient, but if we start to listen for what they're teaching to, then it just becomes an issue of style. And that's fine. We can have different styles, right? Not everyone should coach or communicate the same way. Thank goodness there's variability in humans. But you need to listen underneath that instead of this knee-jerk internet, armchair coach reaction. Bro, are you telling me that eating food is like a gimmick? Stay skeptical. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting what you said. Sometimes being that consultant or that person in the room that's trying to see behind the teaching to extract what the problem is that the coach or the teacher is trying to solve, that person themselves may not even be aware or intentionally trying to solve a problem as much as they're just trying to run a room.
That's right. And what I'll tell you is one of the short circuits or an easy solution to this is who coaches you?
Yeah.
Tell me about your own movement practice and being coached practice, because that's the first and tightest and easiest feedback loop you can get. Wow, I don't really like being shouted at. Wow, that cue just sucked. Oh boy, this person, what is it about this person's coaching that gets immediate buy-in, and how do they work the room or feedback, or how are we, so we can move out of this theoretical. We have to become granular. We have to become more specific about our outcomes, and some of this is difficult. We have really tried to establish what we call movement vital signs in our movement, and that's a phrase I have borrowed from my friend Gray Cook, right? Movement vital signs. But what we say is, what are the bookmarks of function? What are the end ranges that you should be able to express? Why is a handstand so important? Well, it's expression of full overhead capacity and a stable trunk on top of that shoulder. The same thing is a reason to be able to hang from a pull-up bar without your elbows flaring and your back looking like a banana. You should be able to hold two heavy-ass dumbbells over your head simultaneously with your thumbs backwards, right, with your elbows straight. And if you can't do that, then you don't have full physiologic capacity. Doesn't mean you can't work out. It just means you're leaving performance on the table. And what we haven't done is established, what are normal ranges of motion and how are those expressed in ways and models that everyone can quickly see without having to do a bunch of fancy correlates for that. So that's one of the things we're trying to get to the bottom of, is establishing these benchmarks so that everyone can at least have the same operating situation. And let me give you an example. a long time ago, we got embroiled in this knees out debate on the community, which was right. And what I realized, and actually I went on to a CrossFit thing with their host.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I went ahead and said, I was like, well, look, you won't shove your knees too far out if your feet are on the ground and in a good position. Look at your feet. And then we just glanced over that and kept going, right?
Yeah.
And I had already made the point of the solution was to look at the fundamental, joint system of the arch and the ankle. And what I should have done right there is said, stop, let's define our terms. Show me what you mean around foot, and I'll show you what I mean around foot, so at least we can have the same operating definition. Because knee out is really just a cue to maintain the integrity of your arch system, your ankle system. And if your knee comes in, your arch collapses, then what are we even talking about? You're telling me that a collapsed foot, destroyed arch, ankle, completely collapsed, that's that pronated foot. That's the position you're telling athletes to be able to receive in? Nonsense. So what we can then do is when we become a little bit more granular and explain, what I realized is the error was my own. I hadn't explained my thinking very correctly. And this is a valuable aspect of the dissonance that you need to be able to explain more efficiently, and your haters will tell you where your arguments are weak, where you bolster your thinking. And I love what Pavel says, who was very, very influential in my thinking early on. And he would say, look, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm just saying I'm right. And that means that, we are having a communication problem where I haven't demonstrated the principle sufficiently. And that means that's an opportunity for growth and refinement. And now we don't have a closed system, we have an open system.
That's a great way to reframe it.
And speaking of growth and refinement, I know the 102 version of your mobility trainers course is coming out soon. Will this be more of like the principles to help coaches really develop that keen eye to see how people are moving?
Yeah, what we've done is we actually moved. We took about a year and a half ago. We broke up with CrossFit. Took our course, which is hosted by CrossFit. We were teaching our course independently, and just it turned out our platforms didn't work together anymore. And we had some things we wanted to do electronically that just didn't work. And we took the world. When we started teaching this course back in 2008. I would literally walk into a room full of people and be like, this is your leg, these are your quads. And then people would be like, whoa, I just PR'd on my deadlift. I mean, it was like,
so simple.
The bar was very low. Yeah. And what's been great is that people are sufficiently sophisticated and badass enough now to understand a whole order of magnitude more sophisticated information. The world has changed. I mean, radically. In terms of, people like Jill Miller and Thomas Myers, I mean, they have fundamentally altered our thinking around fascia and connective tissue and integrating. Now when a beginner coach comes in, they are much more sophisticated than we were 10 years ago. Is really what we were experienced coaches. Now our newbie coaches come in and they're pretty badass, right? They haven't done all the hard work to understand why they are where they are, but they can benefit, And we see this same phenomenon in action sports, for example, and Stephen Kotler wrote about this in Rise of the Superman. What we're seeing now is that, like, oh yeah, if you go to a Woodward, trampoline camp up in the mountains, you're going to see 6-year-olds throwing backflips on a skateboard or on a snowboard on a trampoline, and they can just throw backflips on as a matter of course in the snow park. If you went back 10 years and watched Shaun White throw a backflip, you're like, oh my God, he did a backflip. Now that's a 6-year-old skill, So, right. The 6-year-old hasn't benefited from decades and decades and decades of understanding. The 6-year-old just watch it on YouTube and do it. And this is why 1080s are a thing, because someone, once that we saw, the Fosbury flop, he went over backwards, he changed things. Once the 4-minute mile barrier is broken, everyone could run the 4-minute mile. And that's the phenomenon of how we've gotten here. So, one of the things that we're trying to do with our young coaches is, have them understand how we got. I forget what the setup with this, or I went on tangent. Apologies.
Oh, tell us about your new course.
So what we've been able to do then is bookmark our 101 information into an online course, and recognizing also that the world of coaching seminars has radically changed. There are so many people vying for our attention. There's 17 Olympic lifting certifications. There's 29 gymnastics certifications. There's 15 yoga. I mean, and people just don't have the time or the energy, and the internet has changed that. So what we realized is we took a page out of the Khan Academy, and even we love what John Berardi was doing with precision nutrition, and instead went ahead and realized that we needed to bookmark this information as a entree into the next level so that people could study at home. We could deliver way more information. And this also solved the problem for us. We've been teaching this course for almost 10 years, this 101 course, and it has evolved and constantly evolved. The number of things we had taken out to make room for new stuff or evolve stuff was significant. And what we were able to do, so if you came to our other course, it was like 7.5 hours of live in person. You've been there, Alice, and you know what's up. What we did with our online course, it's actually 72 instructional modules. Right? There's 500 questions. There's 50 photos with write-ups and demos. And it takes it's 11 hours of video content to go through. And the things we're able to add in give more, to let people study, go back, redigest, go back, integrate, versus me speaking at you from a fire hose for 7 hours. You can't absorb all, but now you can integrate in these little chunks, which is better with the way we learn anyway. And then what we were able to do then is say, hey, look, we've cataloged what we think is our basics course. This is our entree. So to become a specialist in this, you can literally go out, watch our course, and then go out and immediately start practicing the information in the course to whatever it is you do, kettlebells, yoga, swimming, however you train. But what we realized is that we needed a second level assessment. So we now are trying to take with our 102 course is trying to solve the problem, which is what coaches are seeing now, which is, okay, my athlete comes in and her knee is a little sore because she ran a marathon this weekend. What should I do? Should I, how can I assess that? And what we realized is that we needed that coach to become more of a combat medic. They need to be able to take a crack at showing the athlete how she can improve her perfusion, how she can restore and heal those tissues, how she can remove congestion more efficiently. And we saw that a lot of people were still not connecting the dots between the incomplete mechanics they were expressing and normal range of function, right? And so what ended up happening is that we saw this continuum of, and again, this comes out of complexity theory, and I borrowed this from Charles Perrow, but he had an idea that we saw that he's like, look, not everything that happens in a complex system is an accident. Oftentimes, it's just an incident, right? So if I work in a nuclear power plant and something snaps off, that's not a power plant meltdown, malfunction. That's just a break, right? If I go for a run and I overdo it, or my knee is stiff, or I had to jump in the car and my quads hurt a little bit afterwards, that's not an injury. That's an incident. Does that make sense? So now we can start to define, instead of accident, we use the word injury. And we use the incident as, hey, I just benched really heavy and I had some bad technique, and now my shoulder's sore. Who should take care of that? Well, our current model is that the coach isn't empowered to be able to help the athlete understand what the mechanism was about restoring the normal tissues. Instead, we just don't do it. We rest and hope it goes away, or we wait till it's so bad that you go see a doctor or a physical therapist or chiro, which is an asinine backward system, because the coach is a movement expert. So what we've done in the 102 is created a really excellent movement assessment, so that when you come in with a shoulder, and my front of my shoulder hurts, coach, great. Let's see if you have full internal rotation. Let's see if you have full extension. Let's see if the tissues are stiff. Let's see if you can take a crack at improving the perfusion. So now our coaches are going back out and solving these problems in real time. And again, we're agnostic about the style of training in which you engage. It's really about, can you see the components underlying these movement dysfunctions? That's awesome.
Yeah, which is totally awesome, because movement is movement regardless of what you're doing, and we need to be able to see where it goes well and where it's not. So that's
right. And we don't. Right now we're just trying to memorize a bunch. Well, there's all the deadlift errors, and then there's the jumping errors, and you're just like, what are you going to memorize? 500 things that go wrong. You got to start to see where these things are related. I mean, it is the hip. It has always been the hip for 10,000 years. Alexander, the difference between you and me right now versus 10,000 years ago is that, I'm a little fatter and your femur's a little longer. Otherwise, we are the same people we were 10,000 years ago. It's the same shoulder. And I think we forget that in our movement traditions, and this has been the power of the internet, that the movement traditions have really informed us of the critical thinking of that people had engaged in. Seriously, Joseph Pilates was not dicking everyone around trying to make a buck. He was trying to solve a set of problems. As soon as you drop into a good yoga class, you're going to be like, wow, this is genius. Who thought of this? This is amazing. Integrated breathing and down regulation and all the rotational components and spinal stability. Wow, there's a lot going on here. And if you understand yoga, then you're going to understand why the Russians and the Chinese teach Olympic lifting the way they do, because it's the same thing. Technique is just an expression of the normal physiology of the human being.
I noticed one of the pieces, the highlights of the new course is a proper warm-up. How much value do you place on a purposeful warm-up as a conduit for teaching and training mechanics?
Well, I think the questions are, what are we trying to do in the warm-up? So if I just say, go run around the block, kids, there's no skill or teaching involved. I teach at our gym, currently I teach a couple what we call metabolic conditioning classes or skilled conditioning classes. No barbell involved, but we are going to swing kettlebells and dumbbells, but it's skilled conditioning. Yeah. And what I think people forget is that we have all these complex movements, barbell, yoga, gymnastics, and then there's working out. Right. And then as soon as you work out, you just go back and be a piece of meat again. We just put you on the bike and you can flop around and move like crap. And instead, what we need to do is start that teaching assessment process as soon as we warm up. So a good warm-up should, do all the things physiologically that they do. I warm my tissues up. I shift blood from my legs to my, my stomach to my legs. I wake the nervous system, yada, 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 right? I prime my tissues. Should I be reclaiming normal range of motion in my warm-up? Is that what my warm-up is? Because that's a different idea. But what we found is that people are putting their, hey, we're going to press overhead today. Oh, by the way, 90% of my class can't put their arms over my head. What am I really doing in class today? What I'm really doing is never, ever solving a problem. And what we're striving to do is conjoin the strength and conditioning stimulus, the fitness stimulus, with the diagnostic stimulus. Yeah. So I need to be able to understand what it is I'm seeing. And if I take my athletes through a good warm-up, I begin to see where they can't move. And that starts to begin to inform me about the problems I may see or what I may do in the class. If if I put you into downward-facing dog, and your back rounds and your knees are super bent and your elbows are flared, what do I think about your ability to get into a good position, overhead, or a good position on your deadlift setup? I'm like, oh. And so part of this is to remind people and put skill back into the movement. One of my friends, I forget, he says, hey, warm up is about behavior change and behavior priming. That's really what we're trying to do. Right. We're trying to prioritize and reawaken and coach movement behaviors that we're then going to be using later on. So I reserve the right. We have some basics, tenets out of the things that we do regularly. And if you've come to my class, you know what it looks like and smells like. But I'm also constantly keeping my athletes engaged. And sometimes we do some very dynamic hip openers, and then we play double Dutch. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, you can't double Dutch? I thought you were an elite athlete. So I think I reserve the right to always keep it fun and to keep the skill engaged and to put this thing called joy back into training. Because, by the way, training is really fun, and we have sucked all the living joy out of training.
Yeah, that's got to get that play in there. It's amazing to me how I coached a few classes one time where there was an athlete, top level competitor, had a history of asthma, but in his history of doing CrossFit, had never had an asthma attack. I did freeze tag for the warm up, and that was the first time that he was breathing so hard that he had to reach for his inhaler.
Isn't freeze tag great?
Yeah.
Bella Caroli and all the cues are there. I mean, this is why you really want to go study with masters and understand what they were doing. People have been working at solving these problems forever. The Bergner warm-up, Mike Bergner, Coach Bergner, his Olympic lifting warm-up, is brilliant. It hits all of these shoulder archetypes. It reinforces movement patterns, allows coach to cue and correct before we even and it's done with the PVC pipe, right? He is one of the examples where he coached high school kids weightlifting forever. And he also took people to the Olympics. And so there had to be a clear continuation between the skills he was teaching and what he was going up, but, at the highest level. But simultaneously, he realized that, this practice developed to solve a problem. Bella Caroli used to let his, male gymnasts play indoor soccer to get hot and sweaty because it was much more fun. Yeah. The women like to do their form warm-ups. The men like to go play soccer. And then they were hot and sweaty. He's like, great, now we can do our focus corners and work on. But everything else, they were ready to go. And we have lost that notion, I think. And boy, but that was the 70s he was letting his guys play soccer? Come on. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel every 2 seconds.
Right. Bring it back. All right, well, we want to be mindful of your time. We got one more main question, and then we'll switch it to a little rapid fire to finish things off, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So going back a little bit, you were talking about defining terms, refining the language. What are your thoughts on the influence of a coach's words, and do you have any regrets or concerns about some of the language that have become mainstays of, we'll call it the Supple Leopard vernacular?
Well, I think that's a fair question. And the first thing I would do is say, stop using the word mobility. And that's a problem because my business is called Mobility WOD, workout of the day. But what people have done is, as normal, they've substituted the word mobility for stretching. They're like, I need to work on my mobility. And I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, my mobility. I need to mobilize. I'm like, what does that mean? And what I mean when I say mobility is, do you have the motor control and technique to express your biomechanics? That's what I mean, right? It's not pulling on joints. It's, can you do the things we need to do? And there's a lot of motor control componentry to what we do. It's not just smashing your quads out and putting a band on your shoulder and pull on it. That's not our goal. Our goal is all about movement. Movement is the thing. Position is the thing. The application of position is what we're doing. But if you can't get into those positions and don't know how to control those positions, it's just press and guess. So that would be something I would love to change. But unfortunately, I would have to change my business called SuppleLeopard.com. And really, captures it. SuppleLeopard.com. SuppleSolutions.org.
Ooh, when you .org it just becomes that much more
orgy.
Yeah, scientific.
I still think the suppleness ambassador.com.
Ambassador of suppleness.
So on my Twitter handle I write Gom Jabbar. I think that's that's a good reference.
Yeah.
We just one of the things that I think is important. Early on, I would make these videos, and Juliet used to be she used to have the world record for internet stretching video cinematography. It's our COO Dave, who is Dave Beatty, who films all of our stuff, and I think he's surpassed Juliet now with thousands of videos filmed. I think we have about 2,200 videos on the site so far, and Juliet I'd say something, Juliet would be like, that sucked. And I was like, why? She's like, it was so technical and heavy jargon. She's like, you need to do it better. And the next time I'd be better. It was like, stand-up comedians are really good communicators. And one of the reasons is you get immediate feedback that you suck.
Yeah.
Right.
People don't laugh. They boo you off. I mean, imagine teaching some people some squatting and people are like, boo, get out of here. If you was a coach, you'd be like, whoa, I hope I get better tomorrow.
Yeah.
So literally the stuff of nightmares.
That's right. So Juliet would give me a lot of feedback about really making sure that my language was precise and accurate, but yet completely understandable, and moving away from the jargon. Because sometimes I see a lot of language out there and I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah. What are they going for?
Well, I really am like, why are you saying it that way? Like, you're trying to create a whole sub-lexicon of, to make yourself sound cool when you're really describing squatting.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that is important, and one of the things I think reasons that physio is getting its butt kicked in terms of professional identity is they don't speak the language of fitness, they don't speak the language of movement, they don't speak the language of strength and conditioning. That they're really, it's so physios, for lack of better words, oftentimes become what I call tissuists. So obsessed with, what's happening with the moment arm of the serratus that they can't tell if someone actually can put their arms over their head or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't tell that as they do a push-up, what's really happening with the shoulder and the low back. So that's what we need to do, is continue to use the language that everyone else is comfortable with and explain it in those terms.
But I think with that, I have always appreciated where you have you sort of refined and added language that captured the holistic element of it. So for instance, getting organized and what does that mean? And now that we actually, now it sort of cues someone to think, my body can be organized. What does that mean?
Right. And what are the steps and how does that translate? Boy, before I lift this thing up, I should probably squeeze my butt and recapture my abdominals and make sure I can breathe in that position and do some kind of thing like the anal lock, right? I mean, all of those things are granular steps instead of what we've been saying. And I guess this goes back to even some of the things we were talking about before is we would shout at people, get tight.
Right.
And you're like,
what does that mean?
Okay, coach.
Yeah.
And like I get 50 different definitions of get tight in a single class. What's it mean to get tight? Well, the abs you see on the beach, I just make those hard. You're like, okay, right. So that's why women are still peeing themselves, and we think it's a normal process. And what we're not doing is looking around and saying, why aren't we solving these problems? We have to take this bigger look. So, we can be a little bit more granular. And again, all roads lead to Rome. Eventually you're going to get there. We just happen to like our road a lot.
Yeah. You're not alone.
All right, so little rapid fire action. I noticed you have a new podcast called The Ready State. I'm curious, what does a ready state mean to you?
Well, we'll take two parts. One, we're not doing a podcast. These are just audio projects.
Okay.
Having a podcast is like hanging an albatross around your neck. And I have friends who have podcasts and they kick ass. I don't know if you listen to Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
Those guys are really good at their job. You guys are really good at your job. Why would I start that? But what we wanted to do is get Juliet's voice more involved because she's such an important, integral part of the way we think and how we process and deliver. And she's a world champion herself and such a good athlete and really the brains behind the operation. So it's both of us interviewing. And secondarily, what we wanted to do is just create, what kind of seasons or have multiple conversations around a single concept. The ready state is really just sort of this notion that it's always going to be a moving target in terms of creating readiness in your body based on the realities of your life. One of the physios we know on the internet, Todd Davenport, put up this thing yesterday and he said, he's like, why he's like, you're arguing your people to like move around more, but they're sedentary. You can't bitch at them for being sedentary because that job they have pays their bills.
Yeah. Right.
It's how they feed their kids and it forces them to not move around very much. And then, they're also tired and crap. So quit it, start offering solutions. Don't hammer people. And so the idea of the ready state is, okay, what can I control? And how do I sort of optimize my psychological, psychosocial self and my physical self to at least have the best benefit? So what can I control? My wife and I walk our daughter to school. We started a walking school bus. So we walk a 5K in the morning, basically. We walk a mile and so to school. It's like 2.5 basically. And, before we leave the house, we've become very big advocates, not of eating breakfast, but of eating some nutrient-dense foods. Because I know that when I leave my house, my day sometimes doesn't belong to me anymore. Yeah. Right? And I may become so busy that I don't train. But if I've already done some breathing, if I've already gotten it hot or cold, if I've controlled my nutrition a little bit and gotten 8 hours of sleep, then at least I have put something into my physical practice, which is not exercise or training. I've already started to care for the system. And maybe that day is only I take my business meetings walking and I try to get more movement at work. And instead, I do 10 minutes of soft tissue work before I go to bed. At least it's not 1 or 0. There's been constant ways where I can at least control what I can control. And if you're going to be a super rad, badass athlete and go to the Olympics, you're probably going to need to control more. But for the rest of us, we end up wrapping our heads around that I'm either engaged in some high intensity activity and I do meal prep and I'm super paleo vegan ninja, or I'm a failure. And what we need to do is grade that for people where they can say, hey, look at all the things I was able to control today to have a net positive on my life. And that's this ready state. What can we control?
That's awesome. That's so great. Is there any topic, fitness, nutrition, or psychology related that you most are on the fence about in your current practice?
The thing that I think is killing me right now is that I think people are not remembering why we're in the gym in the first place. And I sometimes have dissonance about the fact that people's entire physical self has become a manifestation of the kinds of training they do in the gym. And so if you drop into some secret school program that takes you 4 hours to complete in the gym, you have had no time to actually do this thing called play, do a sport, walk around, engage, learn a new skill. Greg Glassman, a long time ago, the original founder of CrossFit, in Fitness in 100 Words or Less, finishes that by saying, you need to regularly learn and play new sports. And if you ask yourself, when's the last time you learned a new skill? You're going to find that you're going to be like, you mean in the gym, like I did triple unders? I'm like, no, it's not. And I think we've also lost track of the fact that originally we were training for something. And that something is not body composition or more pull-ups. That something isn't competing at fitness. That's fun, and I love it. But that something is skiing, running, biking, paddling, jiu-jitsu, right? And what I think has happened in the world of strength and conditioning programming is that people have lost sight of being able to program for someone who simultaneously does this other sport. They're using training to get better at their sport, right? Not training for training's sake, which is very fine. Because I'll tell you what, there were many times when I was in grad school, running a business, had 2 children, when the only thing I could do was give 40 minutes to my gym practice. And that was enough to bridge. But I didn't ever forget that the reason I was in the gym in the first place was to maintain my health so that I could go do other things. And there are some coaches out there who seem to be very competent, but what you'll find is that it takes so long to do their shit that they don't actually have time. People can't either go do their sport or have the energy to go do their sport or time to go learn a new skill. And I think track athletes have been doing this for a long time. You have to be in the weight room, but you also have to go be out on the track, right? Football players have been doing this for a long time. But the rest of us, sometimes it's either 1 or 0. We forget why we're training. And I think that kernel of truth helps us to refine what's going on. And that's why it's important for coaches and physical therapists to weight train. If you blow your athletes out and they're walking around and are limping and hobbled because they're so sore, then you have actually done them a disservice towards their sport. If they can't do their sport, you're going to get fired. And you would know that because as you're limping and hobbling around, your life sucks. And it's important that you don't have to be the strongest athlete in the gym, but your athletes better be seeing you eating your own cooking.
Practice what you preach.
There it is.
All right, 2 more. What's your biggest coaching pet peeve?
Oh, music too loud. Quit it. It drives me crazy. I mean, if you turn up the music to motivate people, then it's wrong. You need to be coaching your ass off. And a lot of times people turn the music up and then just hide behind the music. I see it in universities. I see it in CrossFit gyms. I see it in training centers. Look, you should always be able to tell where the coaches are in the room. And you can hear them because when I'm coaching everyone. So I may be cueing someone else. It's also for the person behind me. So music is important. I feel like it's an easy place. And if you don't have music, you have to work really hard to create an environment that's exciting and it's a little bit of a crutch. But also, turn down the music, quit it, and coach your ass. Put your phone down and coach your ass off the entire time.
Wonderfully said. All right. Lastly, you've kind of hit on this a little bit. So we usually end with, what does it mean to you to practice what you preach? So I just want to add a more specific direction to that, which is, what kind of responsibility should a coach of movement have to moving well? And with that, what would you say would be the non-negotiables?
You just need to practice yourself. You don't have to move perfectly. You just have to show that you can work at the limits of your range, limits of your capacity. It's a constant negotiation. I'm 43 years old. I have some bad injuries. My right wrist is destroyed from years of kayaking and having it broken twice in football, and right shoulder dislocated, or right elbow dislocated, and I broke my wrist in my mountain biking, all on my right side. So now my right wrist just doesn't work very well. So I have some workarounds, right? I have some compensations, but I'm always working on it, and it doesn't excuse me from training. I finally realized, for example, that you can be too big, you can be too strong. That sounds like heresy, but right now my sport is I'm an endurance open ocean paddler. So the shortest race I do is going to be an hour and a half. So how much do I need to deadlift so I can paddle for an hour and a half, right? Yeah. But it turns out I really like deadlifting. So I've settled into those early benchmarks of strength. Can I bench press 300 pounds? Yes, I can. Can I squat 400 pounds? Yes, I can. Can I lift 500 pounds? Yes, I can. Guess what? Now the conversation is for me is, how much of those things do I need to do to practice and maintain? And if you are teaching squatting and deadlifting and pressing and you can't do those things and you're not practicing those things, you suck.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be the heaviest, but you better do it. And if you don't want a barbell, you can have a dumbbell. And if you're a yoga teacher and you don't have a yoga practice, shame on you, right? Because teaching to talk of bulls is not the same thing as to be in the bull ring.
Yes. On that note, this has been wonderful. It's I always heavily appreciate the inspiration, enthusiasm behind everything you do, Kelly. It's really impactful for those of us like Alex and myself who are what I would consider in the up and coming generation of coaches, and we appreciate the road you've paved to this Rome place.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you guys. It's what's really fun is that this is you can think of this profession and this theory and thinking as an infinite game. You can never master it. You can only play beautifully, and as you've played for a long time, you better play even more beautifully. And that's really the goal. And the goal is to keep everyone playing and to keep these conversations, because I feel like now more than ever, what's happening in the fitness space, the fitness coach, the strength and conditioning coach, is the healthcare provider of the future. It's how we connect people. It's such a powerful place to deliver healthcare information, which means we just have to be a lot better at our jobs. It's important.
Yes.
And did I mention I really like deadlifting? I love it. And breathing.
Yes. Second all of that. Yeah, and I'm just super grateful for you taking the time today to chat with us. I know much of my trajectory of where I am now is because you asked me to squat and I couldn't do it. So it's just been super awesome. I have a ton of great notes here and words of wisdom that should all be turned into bumper stickers of some sort. And they will all be up on the website. And where can people find more about you?
We are
follow what you're
Mobility, WOD, W-O-D, as in workoutoftheday.com. And just as a shout out, we were the first WOD thing ever.
Damn right.
There was no Wadapalooza. There was no, like strength WOD, shoulder WOD, none of that. It was just, we were the first WOD. And if I could go back in time, again, I would change the word mobility and I would change the word WOD. Here we are. So we're at mobilitywod.com, at mobilitywod on Twitter and Instagram. Come hang out with us.
Awesome. Thanks again, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.